It was just another busy afternoon at a small cafe in New York City. The scent of fresh coffee filled the air, and the sound of quiet chatter mixed with the hum of the espresso machine. Behind the counter, a young cashier named Emily moved quickly, greeting customers with a warm smile. She never imagined that one simple act of kindness would put her face to face with the former President of the United States. That day, a tall, quiet teenager walked in, wearing a hoodie pulled slightly over his face. At first, Emily didn't recognize him, but as he approached the register, she noticed something familiar about him. It was Barron Trump. Despite his family's fame, he seemed just like any other kid, polite, reserved, and maybe a little nervous. He ordered a drink and reached into his pocket to pay. That's when it happened. As Barron fumbled with his wallet, a group of customers nearby began to whisper. A few pulled out their phones, their voices growing louder. Emily could feel a shift in the room, the kind of energy that turns a quiet moment into a public spectacle. Barron's face turned red as he struggled to count his cash. The attention was making things worse. That's when Emily acted. Without hesitation, she quickly stepped in, handling the situation with grace before it could spiral into something embarrassing. What she didn't know was that her small, selfless act wouldn't go unnoticed. Just hours later, she received an unexpected phone call, one that would change her life. And the next day, as she walked into work, she was met with something even more shocking. Standing there, larger than life, was Donald Trump himself. But what happened next? Well, you won't believe it. Emily froze in place, her heart pounding as she locked eyes with the man standing in front of her. Donald Trump, the man she had seen on television countless times, was now right there in her cafe. Customers nearby had gone silent, some staring in shock while others whispered among themselves. Emily swallowed hard, her mind racing. Why was he here? Was this about what happened with Barron? Trump took a step forward, his expression unreadable. But before she could say a word, he spoke. "Are you Emily?" His voice was calm but firm. She nodded slowly, gripping the edge of the counter. "Yeah, that's me." For a moment, he just looked at her, as if sizing her up. Then, to her surprise, his serious expression softened. "I heard what you did for my son." Emily felt her face grow warm. She hadn't thought much about it at the time, just an instinct to help someone who seemed overwhelmed. But now, standing before the former president, she realized the weight of that moment. I didn't want him to feel embarrassed," she said, her voice quieter now. It looked like he needed help." Trump nodded slowly, as if processing her words. Behind him, two men in dark suits stood watchfully, their eyes scanning the cafe. It was clear this was no casual visit. Emily's co-workers had stopped what they were doing, watching everything unfold. Some customers had even pulled out their phones, ready to capture whatever was about to happen. Then, something unexpected happened. Trump reached into his pocket and pulled out something, placing it gently on the counter. Emily looked down, her breath catching as she realized what it was. But before she could react, he spoke again, his voice carrying a tone she hadn't expected. "You have no idea how much that meant to my family." Emily's hands shook slightly as she stared at the object in front of her. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. And whatever this was, it was only the beginning. Emily's eyes stayed locked on the small velvet box sitting on the counter. Her mind raced with questions, but before she could ask, Trump spoke again. "Go ahead, open it." His voice was steady, but there was something else there, something deeper. Gratitude? Expectation? She couldn't tell. With slightly trembling fingers, she lifted the lid. Inside was a gleaming gold pin, embossed with the official seal of the President of the United States. It wasn't just any pin. Emily had seen something like this before in news reports. It was a token of appreciation, given only on rare occasions. She glanced up at Trump, searching for an explanation. "You didn't have to step in for Barron," he continued, his gaze steady. "But you did. You didn't do it because of who he is. You did it because you saw someone who needed help." Emily swallowed hard. The moment played back in her mind. How Barron had fumbled with his wallet, how people had started recording, whispering. She had acted before thinking, just wanting to shield him from unnecessary attention. But now standing here, she realized just how much that small act had meant to his family. I just did what anyone would do, she said finally, though she wasn't sure if that was true. Trump studied her for a moment, then let out a quiet chuckle. You'd be surprised how many people wouldn't. He nodded toward the pin. That's a symbol of appreciation, but that's not the only reason I came here. Emily felt a strange tension in the air. Around them, the cafe had become eerily quiet. The two men in suits shifted slightly, their eyes moving through the room. Something about the way Trump spoke made her uneasy, not in a bad way, but in a way that told her this was bigger than she realized. She hesitated before asking, "Then, why did you?" Trump took a deep breath, then leaned in slightly. "Because I think you might be in for something you're not expecting." Emily's pulse quickened. Whatever was coming next, she had a feeling her life was about to change in ways she never imagined. Emily felt the air grow heavier around her, as if the whole cafe was holding its breath. She glanced at Trump, then at the pin still resting in her palm. Her fingers curled around it instinctively, but her mind was spinning. What did he mean? What was she not expecting? Trump straightened, his expression serious now. "You don't realize it yet, but stepping in for Barron wasn't just a small act of kindness. People noticed. The wrong kind of people." Emily's stomach dropped. "What?" she breathed, her voice barely above a whisper. Trump glanced over his shoulder, his security detail already shifting uncomfortably. One of them leaned in and murmured something to him. He gave a short nod before turning back to Emily. "You were recorded that day," he explained. "And now your name is out there. People are trying to figure out who you are." Emily's mind reeled. She had seen a few customers with their phones out, but she hadn't thought much of it. Now, the weight of that moment came crashing down on her. Is something wrong?" she asked carefully, her voice uncertain. Trump sighed, rubbing his fingers together in thought before answering. "Not wrong," he admitted, "but unpredictable. People in the media, people online, they twist things. And now that your face is attached to my family, you might find yourself caught in the middle of something you didn't sign up for." Emily's breath hitched. She had never wanted attention, never sought the spotlight. She was just a cashier trying to do her job. But now somehow, she had been pulled into something much bigger than herself. Then, before she could respond, the cafe door swung open again. A wave of cold air rushed in, and with it, a group of unfamiliar men. They weren't customers. They weren't regulars. And the way their eyes locked onto her made Emily's skin prickle with unease. Trump's security detail immediately tensed. One of them whispered urgently into his earpiece, stepping protectively in front of him. Emily's heart pounded. Something was happening. Something she didn't understand. And whatever it was, she was right in the center of it. Emily's pulse pounded in her ears as the group of men stepped further into the cafe. Their movements were too deliberate, too focused. They weren't here for coffee. They were here for something else, something involving her. Trump's security detail reacted immediately, shifting into position. One of them placed a firm hand on Trump's arm, as if preparing to move him out of harm's way. Another subtly reached inside his suit jacket, his sharp gaze locked on the strangers. Emily could feel a tension rising, thick and suffocating. Then, one of the men, tall, dressed in a dark coat, spoke. Emily Carter. His voice was calm, but there was something about it that sent a chill down her spine. She hesitated. How did they know her name? Trump's expression hardened. "Who's asking?" His voice carried the weight of authority, but the man didn't even flinch. "We just want to talk," the man said, glancing briefly at Trump before turning back to Emily. "It's about what happened with Barron." Emily's throat tightened. This was what Trump had warned her about. People had noticed, and now they were coming straight to her. "I don't understand," she said, her voice quieter now. "What do you want from me?" The man reached into his pocket, and in an instant, one of Trump's security guards stepped forward, gripping his wrist before we could pull anything out. The cafe fell into dead silence. A few customers gasped. Someone dropped their coffee cup, the sound shattering the moment like glass. "Relax," the man said, raising his other hand slowly. "It's just a business card." The security guard let go, but the tension remained. The man carefully pulled out the small white card and placed it on the counter in front of Emily. She hesitated before picking it up. There was no company logo, no official markings, just a name, a phone number, and one short message. ***, we need to talk. Urgently, ***. Emily looked up, her heart racing. "Who are you?" The man gave the smallest hint of a smile. "Someone who knows this is bigger than you realize." Trump exhaled sharply, shaking his head. "You don't have to listen to them," he told Emily firmly. She looked between Trump, the security team, and the strangers standing in front of her. Whatever this was, it was no longer just about Barron. It was about her. And for the first time, she wasn't sure she wanted to know why. Emily's fingers tightened around the card as she looked up at the man standing in front of her. The entire cafe seemed frozen, waiting for what would happen next. She could feel Trump's eyes on her, his expression unreadable, but his message was clear: don't trust them. But something inside her told her that whoever these men were, they weren't just random strangers. They knew something, and she needed answers. Taking a steady breath, she finally spoke. "What is this really about?" The man studied her for a moment, then leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. Barron wasn't supposed to be there that day. His security team lost track of him for a full 5 minutes before he walked into this cafe. That never happens. Emily's stomach twisted. "Lost track," she echoed. Trump's expression darkened. "That's enough," he snapped. "She doesn't need to be involved in this." The man ignored him. "We believe someone was watching Barron, waiting for the right moment. But when you stepped in, you changed everything. That video of you helping him, it didn't just go viral. It disrupted something bigger." Emily's breath caught. This wasn't just about her kindness being noticed. She had unknowingly interfered with something planned. But by who? And for what? Before she could process the weight of that revelation, one of Trump's security guards suddenly grabbed his earpiece. "We need to move. Now." His voice was sharp, urgent. Outside, through the cafe's glass windows, Emily saw them, several dark SUVs pulling up along the curb. Men in suits were already stepping out, their movements precise, controlled. This wasn't random. Someone else had arrived, and they weren't just here for coffee. Trump turned to Emily, his voice quieter now. "You have two choices. You walk away, pretend none of this happened, or..." He glanced at the card still in her hand. "You find out the truth." Emily's pulse pounded. Every instinct told her that whatever was happening was far bigger than she ever imagined. But the question was she ready for it? Just as she was about to answer, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out and froze. Unknown number, one message. ***, don't trust anyone. We're watching ***. Her breath hitched. She looked up, but the men in suits were already stepping inside. The moment of decision had arrived, and deep down, Emily knew, no matter what choice she made, her life would never be the same again. Emily's grip tightened around her phone as she read the message again. Her heart pounded, every nerve in her body screaming that she was in way over her head. She looked up at Trump, then at the men stepping into the cafe. The weight of the moment pressed down on her. She had never asked for any of this, but now she was at the center of something much bigger than she could have ever imagined. Trump's security team was already moving, positioning themselves between him and the approaching men. The tension in the air was thick, almost suffocating. Emily could feel the weight of a choice pressing down on her. Did she walk away and pretend none of this had happened? Or did she demand the truth and risk being pulled even deeper? The man in the dark coat took a slow step forward, his eyes locked onto hers. "Emily, you need to come with us," he said. His tone was calm, but there was an urgency underneath it. "We can explain everything." Trump shook his head. "She's not going anywhere with you." His voice was firm, protective. For a moment, Emily saw something in his expression, genuine concern. Whatever this was, it wasn't just politics, it was personal. She exhaled slowly, her mind racing. And then she made her decision. She stepped back, closer to Trump's side. "I don't know who you are," she told the man, "but I'm not going anywhere until I know exactly what's going on." The man sighed, slipping his hands into his pockets. "Then you've made your choice." Without another word, he turned and signaled to his team. Just like that, they walked out of the cafe, disappearing into the waiting SUVs. No threats, no last warnings, just an unsettling silence as the vehicles pulled away. Emily turned to Trump. "What now?" Trump studied her for a moment, then nodded approvingly. "Now," he said, "now we make sure you stay safe." As they stepped outside, Emily realized something. Her life had changed forever. She didn't know what the future held, but one thing was clear: this was only the beginning.